Let me ask you something that most people never pause long enough to consider. When something upsetting happens, do you instantly react or do you respond with intention? In today's world, it feels like everything demands a quick reaction. Someone says something offensive, we snap back. A plan falls apart, we panic. We scroll through social media, read headlines, deal with delays, disagreements, disappointments, and before we know it, our peace has been handed over to chaos. Again. But here's a quiet truth most people overlook. The real power lies in the space between what happens and what we choose to do next. That space, though tiny, is sacred. It's the place where freedom lives. It's where our emotions rise, but we don't have to follow them. It's where we feel anger, but pause instead of explode. It's where we feel fear, but don't let it steer the wheel. And this space is what the Stoics called the foundation of a resilient life. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't telling us to suppress our emotions or pretend things don't bother us. He was pointing to something deeper, that our emotional suffering often comes not from the events themselves, but from our judgments about them. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Did they disrespect you? Or are they just distracted and rushing? You didn't get that opportunity. Does it mean you're not good enough? Or that life is redirecting you towards something better? The answer doesn't lie in the event. It lies in how you see it. And in that awareness, right there, is your power. This video is not about becoming emotionless. It's not about bottling up your feelings or pretending life doesn't get messy. It's about learning how to stay calm in the storm, to feel deeply without being swept away, to recognize that you are not a puppet of the world. You are the author of your response. Imagine this. You're walking into a storm. Winds are loud. Rain is lashing sideways. Most people would run, yell, or panic, but you breathe, you pause, you observe, you adjust your stride with calm, and you keep walking. Not because the storm isn't real, but because your peace doesn't depend on its noise. That's what this journey's about. It's about mastering that pause. It's about finding clarity in the chaos. It's about reclaiming your emotional independence. So your peace no longer depends on people behaving a certain way or life going exactly as planned. If you've ever felt like your emotions hijack your day, like your reactions cost you more than they're worth, or like you're tired of being controlled by what's outside of you, then you're not alone. And you're in the right place. This isn't quick fix advice, it's daily work, quiet work, inner work. But it's the kind of work that transforms everything from the inside out. So today, I invite you to slow down, to step into that small but powerful space between stimulus and response, and to rediscover a kind of strength the modern world has nearly forgotten: the power of not reacting. Part 1. Understanding emotional triggers. Have you ever reacted so strongly to something that even you were surprised by your own emotion? Maybe someone interrupted you mid-sentence and your chest tightened instantly. Maybe a coworker dismissed your idea and a quiet fury rose in you before you even knew why. Or maybe someone forgot to text back and it felt like rejection even though your mind knew it wasn't personal. Here's the thing. Most of our intense emotional reactions aren't just about what's happening right now. They're echoes from earlier in life. A strong reaction is often a signal, pointing not just to the present moment, but to a memory buried underneath it. A time we felt dismissed, unsafe, unloved, or unseen. And even if we don't consciously remember that moment, Our body and emotions do. This is what we call an emotional trigger. And it's important to understand a trigger is not a weakness, it's a message. The Stoic philosophers, especially Marcus Aurelius, reminded us that we are not disturbed by things, but by the views we take of them. And those views, those judgments, are shaped by years of experiences, both conscious and unconscious. When we get triggered, it's not because we're broken, it's because we've been shaped. So instead of judging yourself when a strong emotion rises, try this. Pause. Ask gently, what is this really about? Is it the situation in front of me, or is it touching something older inside me? The moment you ask that question, something shifts. You move from being controlled by the emotion to observing it. That's where real strength begins, not in suppressing how we feel, but in understanding it. Think of your emotional triggers like a sensitive alarm system. Yes, it might go off too easily sometimes, but instead of ripping it off the wall, what if you learned how to rewire it? With time, awareness, and compassion, you can. Here's a practical place to start. Notice your patterns. Do you always feel extra hurt when someone criticizes you? Do you overreact when you feel ignored or excluded? These patterns often point to moments in childhood or early life where your emotional needs weren't fully met. And that's not a sign of weakness. It's an invitation to heal, to grow, to reclaim power over your own reactions. Remember, awareness doesn't mean the triggers go away overnight, but it means they stop controlling you. Imagine walking into a room full of sharp corners in the dark. You're going to bump into everything. But if you turn on the light, you begin to move with care, with clarity, with choice. That's what self-awareness does. It helps you navigate your inner world with wisdom instead of fear. And maybe the most important thing, it gives you back your agency. You're no longer just reacting, you're responding. You're no longer stuck in old stories, you're rewriting them. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, ask with gentleness, what story am I still carrying? And am I ready to see it clearly so it no longer defines me? This is how we grow, not by pretending we're not triggered, but by becoming wise enough to learn from it. Part 2. Noticing the body, your emotional alarm system. Before your mind even has time to form a thought, your body already knows. Think about the last time you felt anxious. Maybe your chest got tight. Maybe your breathing grew shallow. Or maybe your stomach turned for no clear reason. That wasn't random. That was your body speaking to you, whispering something your mind hadn't yet caught up with. One of the most overlooked truths in emotional mastery is this: the body reacts before the mind. Long before we label an emotion, before we say I'm angry or I'm overwhelmed, our nervous system is already responding. It's the quickening of the heart, the clenching of the jaw, the restless tapping of a foot. These are not meaningless signals. They're early warnings. They're invitations to pause before the emotion takes over. The Stoics didn't speak about the body in modern terms, but their practices reflected this wisdom. Marcus Aurelius often described watching his thoughts from a distance, like an observer. Today we expand that awareness into the body itself, because this is where the emotion begins, not in words but in sensation. So why does this matter? Because when you learn to notice your body's signals, you get ahead of the emotional storm. You create what Stoics called the gap, the sacred pause between stimulus and response. Imagine this. Someone says something rude. Your shoulders tense. Your breath shortens. You're on the edge of snapping. But what if, in that very moment, you notice the tightness? What if you took one slow breath and said to yourself, Something's rising in me, but I don't have to act on it yet. That one breath, that awareness, it changes everything. Most people live disconnected from their bodies. We rush through our days lost in thought, unaware of the emotional signals building inside us, until they explode. And then we regret what we said, what we did, or what we suppressed. But when you practice body awareness, you step off that cycle. You become someone who can feel the first ripple of stress and choose stillness. You recognize the lump in your throat, not as a weakness, but as a sign you need care, not combat. You catch the rising adrenaline in your chest and use it to ground, not react. Here's something practical to try today. Next time you feel discomfort, don't rush to fix it. Don't numb it. Just pause. Scan your body. Ask, where do I feel this most strongly? Is it heat in my face? Tension in my hands? A flutter in my stomach? Breathe into that space, not to make it disappear, but to bring your full attention to it. Because when you notice your body without judgment, you create space. And in that space, you find your power. This is not avoidance. This is not weakness. It's emotional maturity. It's radical presence. In a world that teaches us to live in our heads, this is a return to wholeness. Remember, mastery doesn't mean you never feel anger, fear, or anxiety. It means you learn to feel them without being ruled by them. Your body is not the enemy. It's your first ally. It's your emotional compass, always pointing you toward awareness. And the more you listen to it, the more you tune into its signals, the less likely you are to be hijacked by emotion, and the more likely you are to respond with grace. So next time your body speaks, don't ignore it. Pause, breathe, and let it guide you back to yourself. Part 3, creating a pause before reacting. There's a moment so brief, so subtle, you could almost miss it. It's the space between what happens and how you choose to respond. And in that space, my friend, lives your freedom. Most of us move so quickly through life that we don't even notice this gap. Something triggers us, a rude comment, a sudden setback, a disappointing message, and we go straight into reaction mode. Snap, defend, withdraw. It feels automatic, because it often is. But what if you didn't have to live like that? What if instead of reacting instantly, you could pause, just long enough to make a different choice? Not from fear, not from pride, but from clarity. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus taught, we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. That's the essence of this practice. To find the pause, to live inside it, to turn that moment into your place of power. Let's get real. This isn't easy. Your biology is wired for speed. Your nervous system is designed to protect you. So when you feel threatened, even emotionally, your body floods with energy. Fight, flight, freeze. It's not your fault. It's your design. But here's the good news. You can retrain your response. And it starts with something simple, yet powerful. Your breath. When you feel that heat rising, that tension building, that urge to react, don't speak. Don't move. Just breathe. Inhale slowly. Exhale even slower. This single breath is not just air. It's a signal to your nervous system that you're safe enough to slow down. It's the bridge between impulse and intention. And once you're in that space, once you've paused, you gain the ability to choose. You can ask, what am I about to say? Will this help or harm? Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it wise? Those questions shift your mindset from reaction to reflection. They move you out of the storm and back to your center. Let me share something personal. There was a time when I believed reacting quickly was a sign of strength, that being sharp, assertive, or always having the last word showed control. But over time, I realized it wasn't control, it was reactivity, and it often cost me peace, relationships, and self-respect. True strength, I've learned, is quiet. It's the strength to breathe instead of lash out, to reflect instead of rush, to pause, even when every part of you wants to jump in. And over time, this pause becomes your habit, your rhythm, your anchor in hard conversations, stressful moments, and emotional storms. It's not about staying silent forever. It's about speaking from clarity instead of chaos. It's about protecting your values instead of defending your ego. So today, just try this. Next time something triggers you, pause. Just for a moment. Breathe. Feel. Choose. You may not change the world with that one breath, but you just might change the outcome of that moment. And over time, moment by moment, that's how you change your life. Part 4. Practicing mindfulness in daily life mindfulness. It's a word we've all heard, maybe in a meditation app, a yoga class, or a wellness podcast. But here's a gentle reminder. Mindfulness isn't just something you do, it's a way of being. And in the middle of busy schedules, traffic, notifications, and constant noise, mindfulness simply means this: coming back to this moment again and again with full attention. It doesn't require you to escape to a mountaintop. You don't need candles or silence or a 10-day retreat. You just need to be present where you already are. The Stoics didn't use the word mindfulness, but they lived its spirit. Marcus Aurelius, in his private reflections, urged himself to stay focused on the task at hand, to act with integrity, and to return to the present whenever his mind wandered. And isn't that what mindfulness really is? Returning. Returning from worry, from overthinking, from the future and the past, back to now. So how do we practice that? Practically, start small. When you drink your morning coffee, actually taste it. Feel the warmth in your hands. Notice the aroma. Let that first sip be your anchor. When you walk, feel your feet meet the ground. Notice the air, the light, the rhythm of your steps. This isn't about doing something new. It's about doing what you already do with presence. And here's why it matters. When you're present, you notice things, inside and out. You catch the flicker of tension before it becomes anger. You notice the knot of anxiety before it tightens into panic. You hear your own self-talk more clearly, and maybe, just maybe, you soften it. Mindfulness sharpens your perception. It helps you respond instead of react. It gives you just enough space to say, wait, what's really going on here? Before you spiral into emotion or habit. Let me ask you something. How many moments of your day do you truly live? Not just get through, not just survive, but actually live with awareness, with presence, with choice? The truth is, many of us are sleepwalking through our lives, moving, talking, even loving, but not fully awake to any of it. Mindfulness is how we wake up. It's not about perfection. You'll forget, you'll drift, and that's okay, because mindfulness isn't about staying in the present perfectly. It's about coming back to it gently every time you leave. Even when you're washing dishes, answering emails, or stuck in traffic, those moments can be invitations, not inconveniences. You don't need more time. You just need more presence in the time you already have. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Your mind becomes less chaotic, less easily pulled in every direction. Your emotions lose their grip, and instead of being thrown by every wave, you begin to surf them with balance, with clarity, with grace. Over time, you don't just respond better, you live better, more grounded, more open, more alive. So here's a small challenge. Choose one moment today, just one, and live it fully. Breathe into it, feel it, be in it. That's where your power lives. Not in the past you can't change, not in the future you can't control, but in the quiet strength of right now. Practice presence, not to escape life, but to finally experience it. Part 5. Cultivating deep self-awareness. What if the most important relationship in your life is the one you have with yourself? We often think of self-awareness as simply knowing what we're feeling or noticing our habits. But true self-awareness goes much deeper than that. It's not just about what you do or feel. It's about why. Why do I react this way? Why does this person or situation trigger something in me? Why do I keep repeating certain patterns even when I know they don't serve me? When you begin to ask these kinds of questions, not with judgment, but with curiosity, you start unlocking the deeper layers of your emotional life, and that's where real growth begins. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, wrote page after page not to impress anyone, but to examine himself, to study his thoughts, to call out his impulses, to notice where he was falling short, not to shame himself, but to stay grounded in truth. We can do the same. And one of the most powerful tools, journaling. Now, I don't mean the polished kind of journaling with perfect handwriting and clever insights. I mean the raw, honest kind where you put your messy thoughts on paper and just look at them. No editing, no censoring, just noticing. When you write down your thoughts, something interesting happens. What once felt overwhelming becomes clearer. What was hiding beneath the surface starts to rise. And suddenly you begin to see patterns, old beliefs, repeated emotional loops, unconscious behaviors that have been running your life in the background. And here's the best part. Once you see it, you can change it. You can't transform what you're unwilling to face, but once you shine a light on those inner shadows, they lose their power over you. Self-awareness is the bridge between emotional reactivity and emotional freedom. It's what allows you to pause in the heat of the moment and say, I know this feeling. I've met it before, and I don't have to be ruled by it today. This doesn't mean you'll never stumble. You will. But when you cultivate awareness, even your setbacks become teachers. Even your pain becomes a signal, not a sentence. And you start to treat yourself differently, not with harshness, but with quiet honesty and compassion. You begin to understand that your patterns aren't flaws. They're survival strategies you once needed, but no longer do. Over time, you don't just know yourself better, you relate to yourself better, with clarity, with kindness, with strength. And from that inner relationship, everything else begins to shift. Your choices, your reactions, your relationships, your peace. Over time, you don't just see yourself more clearly. You become more free, more honest, more whole. So here's a gentle practice to try. Each evening, take 5 minutes. Ask yourself, what did I feel today? What triggered me? What surprised me? And what did I learn about myself? Write it down. No filters, no pressure. Just observe. You don't need to fix anything right away. Just begin by seeing it, because when you really see yourself, without distortion or denial, you open the door to something rare and powerful, a life lived with intention, and a mind that's finally at peace with itself. Part 6. Labeling and accepting emotions. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by a wave of emotion and you couldn't quite explain why? One moment you're calm, The next, something small happens, and suddenly you're irritated, anxious, or deeply sad. You tell yourself to just get over it, or worse, you try to push it away like it doesn't exist. But here's the truth. You cannot manage what you refuse to name. And this is where so many of us get stuck, not because we feel too much, but because we don't know how to face what we feel. Labeling your emotions is the first act of power. It's that small but transformative step of saying, this is anger, this is sadness, this is fear. When you name an emotion, it stops being a vague force in the background and becomes something you can observe. You're no longer inside the storm, you're standing on the shore, watching the waves roll in. The Stoics understood this well. They weren't emotionless, they were emotionally aware. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that's exactly what happens when we don't name what we're feeling. It stays abstract, distorted, overwhelming. But when you label the emotion honestly, without judgment, you bring it into the light. And then comes the second part, acceptance. Now let's be clear, acceptance doesn't mean agreement. It doesn't mean you approve of every emotion or surrender to it. It means you stop fighting reality. It means acknowledging, yes, I feel anger right now, and that's okay. Yes, this sadness is here. I don't need to rush it away. Acceptance is the quiet strength to sit beside your emotion without letting it drive the car. Because emotions, like weather, are always changing. You don't control when a storm rolls in, but you can choose how you prepare for it. You can recognize, this is rain, not a flood. I'll let it pass. The more you resist an emotion, the stronger it becomes. But the more you observe it with calm awareness, the less control it has over you. Try this the next time you feel something rising. Pause, take a breath, and simply say, this is insert feeling. Even whispering it to yourself softens the hold it has on you. You don't need to solve the emotion in that moment. You don't need to fix yourself. You just need to see it and allow it to be seen. Over time, you'll notice something powerful. The emotions that used to hijack your entire day now pass more gently. You react less, you understand more, and your inner life becomes a space of clarity rather than chaos. Over time, you don't just label emotions, you master your relationship with them. You become more peaceful, more self-aware, more fully alive. So the next time something stirs inside you, pause, name it, accept it. Let it move through you instead of becoming you. Because freedom isn't found in never feeling, it's found in feeling wisely. Part 7. Reframing negative thoughts. Sometimes it's not the situation that hurts us most. It's the story we tell ourselves about it. You get passed over for an opportunity, and the voice in your head whispers, you're not good enough. A friend cancels plans, and your mind jumps to, they don't really care. You make a mistake, and suddenly it becomes, I always mess things up. Do any of these sound familiar? This is the mind's habit of assigning meaning to everything we experience. And when we're not aware of it, that meaning often leans toward the negative. But here's the truth the Stoics knew well. It's not what happens to you that causes suffering, it's how you interpret it. Epictetus said it clearly. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view they take of them. That view, that story, is what reframing invites us to examine and, when needed, transform. Reframing isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's not about toxic positivity or denying pain. It's about choosing a more accurate, empowering perspective, one that frees us instead of traps us. For example, let's say you fail at something important. The automatic thought might be, I'm a failure. But reframing says, I failed at this one thing, but that doesn't define who I am. What can I learn from it? Same situation, different story, different emotional outcome. This small shift creates space to reflect, to grow, and to respond more wisely. One of the most powerful questions you can ask in a difficult moment is, what else could this mean? Could they be distant because they're struggling, not because you did something wrong? Could this setback be a redirection, not a rejection? Reframing doesn't erase the pain, it puts it in a healthier context. It allows you to move through hard moments without letting them rewrite your identity. The mind loves certainty, even when it's painful. But when we slow down and challenge our automatic thoughts, we interrupt that pattern. We replace blame with understanding, harshness with compassion, and over time, these micro shifts change how we experience the world and ourselves. This is where Stoicism meets neuroscience, because the stories you tell yourself repeatedly, they shape the very structure of your brain. So ask yourself, what kind of thoughts do I want to reinforce? What kind of person am I becoming through the narratives I choose to believe? It's not about ignoring problems. It's about training your mind to see them through a wiser lens, to stop living in reaction to every thought and start responding from clarity and truth. Over time, you don't just think differently, you live differently, more grounded, more open, more resilient. So the next time your mind spirals into a dark story, pause, breathe, and ask gently, is this true? Is it helpful? Is there another way to see this? Because the story you choose shapes the life you live, and you always have the power to write a better one. Part 8. Practicing empathy and compassion. We often think of strength as toughness, being unshakable, unbothered, emotionally armored. But what if real strength looks different? What if true resilience isn't about being hard, but about staying soft in a world that tempts us to shut down? Empathy and compassion are often mistaken for weakness, but in truth, they are two of the greatest signs of inner strength. To be empathetic is to look beyond behavior and see the pain behind it. To recognize that when someone lashes out, withdraws, or disappoints you, it's not always personal. It may be the echo of their own wounds, their own battles, their own exhaustion. And just like you, they're trying to make it through the day with the tools they have. That doesn't mean you excuse harmful behavior. Boundaries still matter. But empathy helps you protect your peace without poisoning your heart. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, whenever you're about to find fault with someone, ask yourself, what fault of mine most nearly resembles this one? It's a powerful reminder. Not to self-blame, but to self-reflect. To remember that we are all flawed, and yet still worthy of kindness. The more you understand yourself, the more compassion you naturally extend to others. But here's the part we often forget. Empathy and compassion must also point inward, because while we may show patience to a friend who's struggling, we're often brutal to ourselves. We replay our mistakes. We criticize our flaws. We expect perfection from someone who's still learning, ourselves. That's why self-compassion isn't optional. It's essential. When you practice self-compassion, you're not letting yourself off the hook. You're meeting yourself where you are. You're saying, I made a mistake, but that doesn't define me. I lost my temper, but I'm still growing. I'm human, and I can try again. Just like empathy softens your view of others, self-compassion softens your inner world. And that softness makes you stronger, not weaker. You stop being a prisoner of shame. You start becoming a trusted ally to yourself. This shift changes how you move through life. Instead of constantly defending yourself, you begin to understand yourself. Instead of reacting from pain, you respond from presence. Over time, you don't just treat others more kindly, you become a safer, more nurturing place for your own soul to land, more steady, more whole, more human. So here's a gentle question to ask yourself. How would I speak to a friend who felt what I feel right now? And what would change if I spoke to myself with that same tone? The world doesn't need more harshness. It needs more understanding. And that starts with how we treat ourselves and each other when we fall short. Empathy is not a soft skill. It's a soul skill. And when practiced with sincerity, it becomes a quiet superpower. So today, choose softness where the world expects hardness. Extend grace where the world chooses judgment. And start with the person you see in the mirror. Part 9. Taking full responsibility for your reactions. Let's be honest. Taking responsibility for our reactions isn't always easy. It's much more comfortable to blame the traffic, the rude email, the insensitive comment. It's tempting to say, they made me mad, or that situation ruined my day. But here's the quiet truth that Stoicism has taught for centuries. You don't control the world, but you always control how you meet it. Epictetus said it best. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Your power isn't in controlling events. It's in mastering the space between stimulus and response. Responsibility, then, isn't about blame. It's about ownership. When you own your emotional responses, you're not saying the other person was right. You're saying, I choose not to hand over my peace. You're saying, this moment is difficult, but I'm still in charge of how I show up. That's real strength. Because the truth is, excuses are seductive. They comfort the ego. They protect the story that says, I'm this way because of them. But excuses keep you stuck. Ownership, on the other hand, sets you free. Let me ask you something. Is there a reaction you've repeated again and again? Snapping, withdrawing, spiraling, because it feels automatic? What would change if, instead of defending it, you got curious about it? Maybe that anger is masking hurt. Maybe that shutdown is self-protection. And maybe, just maybe, you have more control than you think. Taking full responsibility isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing growth over comfort. It's about looking in the mirror, not to criticize, but to understand. To say, I see where I fell short, and I see how I can rise again. Over time, this mindset shift changes everything. You don't just react less, you grow more. You feel stronger, calmer, more deeply rooted in yourself. So the next time you feel triggered, don't rush to point the finger outward. Pause, breathe, ask, what part of this is mine to work on? Because when you stop giving away your power, you start reclaiming your peace. And when you take full ownership of your reactions, you unlock the door to lasting emotional freedom. That's the path of the Stoic, not one of blame, but of quiet strength, not one of control over others, but mastery over self. And in that, you'll find a kind of freedom the world can't take from you. Part 10. Releasing ego, pride, and grudges. Let me ask you something gently, but honestly. What are you still holding on to that's quietly holding you back? Maybe it's an old grudge, a moment of betrayal, a conversation that ended badly. Or maybe it's just pride, the kind that whispers, I'll forgive, but only if they go first. We all carry these things, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. And at first it can feel like armor, like self-protection. But over time, that armor becomes a cage. Here's the truth that Stoicism and emotional wisdom both remind us of. Your ego is not your strength. Your grudge is not your justice. And your peace is too expensive to trade for pride. Marcus Aurelius wrote, The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. In other words, your greatest power is not in reacting, but in rising. That's what forgiveness really is. It's not about pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's about choosing not to let that hurt define your future. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's emotional clarity. It's saying, I refuse to carry pain that no longer belongs in my hands. Letting go doesn't mean you lose. It means you win your peace back. And let's be honest, ego doesn't make you stronger. It makes you more reactive. It says, don't let them get away with it. But wisdom asks a better question. Why should I suffer twice, once from their actions and once from my refusal to release them? When you cling to bitterness, you're tethered to the past. When you release it, you open up to what's next. Let me offer you a reframe. Letting go is not surrender. It's a return to clarity, to energy, to who you were before resentment clouded your light. You don't have to condone what happened. You don't even have to speak to that person again. But you can choose not to replay that pain in your mind every day. And here's what happens over time. You feel lighter. You think clearer. You move through life with less tension and more grace. You don't just get through the day. You rise above it, freer, stronger, more at peace. So today, just ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this story helping me heal or keeping me stuck? Because when you release what no longer serves you, you don't become less of yourself. You become more of who you really are. And that is the quiet, powerful work of emotional freedom. Part 11. Setting healthy boundaries and communicating clearly. Let's talk about something most of us were never really taught growing up. Boundaries. Not the kind that push people away, but the kind that help you stay close to yourself. Because here's a truth that changes everything. Boundaries are not walls. They're bridges to mutual respect. They are not punishments. They're clarity. They don't say, stay out. They say, this is where I end and where you begin. Think about it. How many times have you said yes when you meant no? How often have you felt drained, not because life was too much, but because you were giving more than you had to give? The Stoics believed in living with integrity, meaning your actions align with your values. And setting boundaries is a powerful way to live that out. It's saying, I respect myself enough to speak honestly. I trust myself enough to follow through. But here's the key. Healthy boundaries don't have to be harsh. You can say what you need with calm, with kindness, with clarity. Something like, I'm not available for that today, or I need time to process before I respond, or simply, that doesn't work for me right now. No drama, no guilt, just self-respect in action. And here's the part most people miss. You have to honor your boundaries first before expecting others to. If you constantly override your own needs, if you say one thing but tolerate another, you're teaching people that your no doesn't really mean no, that your time, your space, your energy are negotiable. But when you show up with consistency and calm conviction, something powerful happens. People begin to respect your boundaries because they see you respect them yourself. And if they don't, that's useful information too. Clear communication is part of this too. It's not just about drawing lines. It's about making sure those lines are visible. When you express your needs clearly, without blame or apology, you're not being difficult. You're being honest. And honesty is a form of kindness, both to yourself and to others. So here's something to reflect on. What boundary have you been avoiding, and what would it feel like to finally honor it? Over time, practicing this doesn't just protect your peace, it shapes your life. You become more confident, less resentful, and far more connected to yourself and to others. Because boundaries aren't about keeping love out. They're about making sure the love you give and receive is honest, respectful, and sustainable. So today, choose clarity over discomfort. Say what you mean with grace, and give yourself the same care you so freely offer to everyone else. Part 12. Managing stress and anxiety with practical tools. Let's be honest. Stress and anxiety aren't rare visitors in our lives anymore. For many of us, they've moved in, quietly, daily, sometimes without us even realizing it. You wake up already behind. You juggle deadlines, bills, expectations, a phone that never stops buzzing, and somewhere in the middle of all this noise, you start to feel it. Tightness in your chest, your breath shortening, your thoughts spiraling. So what do? The answer isn't to fight stress, it's to work with it, to build a relationship with it, one grounded in awareness, not avoidance. And that's where practical tools come in, not grand theories, but simple human ways to return to yourself. Start with your breath. When anxiety surges, slow down. Try inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4, and exhaling for 6. Do that for a minute. It's not magic, it's biology. It tells your nervous system, you're safe, you're okay, you can soften. Next, movement. Go for a walk, stretch, shake out your hands. You don't need a gym. You just need to move the emotion out of your body. Stress stored is stress intensified, but stress expressed, that's energy being released. Then consider reframing. Ask yourself, what else could this mean? Instead of this is a disaster, maybe it's this is a test of my patience. Instead of I'm failing, maybe it's I'm growing through something difficult. Reframing isn't denial. It's choosing not to suffer twice, once from the event and again from the story we tell about it. And one of the most powerful tools, journaling. When you feel overwhelmed, don't keep it in your head. Put it on paper. Let your mind spill out in ink. No structure needed, just honesty. It's like giving your emotions a place to go instead of letting them spin endlessly inside you. And finally, simplicity. Sometimes the fastest way to ease stress is to subtract. Say no to one thing. Log off 30 minutes earlier. Drink water. Breathe. Sit still. It doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. Remember, stress is part of life, but suffering doesn't have to be. Accept that stress will visit, but don't let it unpack and stay. Treat it like a passing wave. Feel it, ride it, release it. And over time, when you practice these tools with gentleness, something shifts. You don't just manage stress. You grow stronger than it, more present, more balanced, more peaceful, no matter what the world throws your way. So today, if you're feeling stretched thin, start small. One breath, one step, one page, and come home to yourself, one grounded moment at a time. Part 13. Embracing imperfection and practicing self-compassion. Let's start with something we all know, but often forget. Perfection is a myth. It's a moving target that keeps us running, exhausted, never quite feeling good enough. You try to be the perfect parent, the perfect partner, the perfect employee, the perfect version of yourself, and still something always feels lacking. But here's a radical idea. What if the goal was never perfection, but growth? What if the real strength was in showing up, flaws and all, and saying, I'm still learning, I'm still becoming, and that's okay. The Stoics understood this deeply. They weren't about chasing flawlessness. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, wrote nightly in his journals, not to boast, but to remind himself how far he still had to go. It wasn't self-criticism. It was humble, honest reflection. And that's the key. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It's the foundation that allows growth to actually happen. Because when you treat yourself like a failure for every misstep, you don't grow. You shrink. You hide. You freeze. But when you treat your mistakes with kindness, something changes. You start learning from them instead of being crushed by them. You start showing up with more courage. And maybe, just maybe, you start loving yourself, not in spite of your imperfections, but because of them. So let me ask you, when was the last time you gave yourself grace? Not an excuse, not a pass, but real grace. The kind you'd offer a dear friend who's struggling. You are not meant to be flawless. You are meant to be real. And being real means getting it wrong sometimes. It means stumbling, apologizing, starting over, and still choosing to keep going with a gentle heart and an open mind. Your flaws are not proof of your failure. They are signs of your humanity. They are where your compassion grows, where your empathy deepens, where your wisdom begins. Because the truth is, when you embrace your imperfections, you also begin to embrace others more fully. You stop demanding perfection from the world because you've stopped demanding it from yourself. Over time, this mindset doesn't just help you grow. It helps you live with softness, with resilience, and with quiet confidence. You don't just judge yourself less, you connect with life more. So here's your reminder for today. Be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best you can with what you know, and that is more than enough. Part 14. Developing a growth mindset and emotional balance. What if failure wasn't the end of the road, but the very sign that you're on the road? Too often we treat setbacks like final verdicts. I'm not good enough. I'll never get it right. I guess this isn't for me. But what if you paused and reframed it? What if you saw failure not as a punishment, but as information? Not as a wall, but as a window, offering you a new way to grow? That's the heart of a growth mindset. Understanding that your worth is not fixed. Your intelligence, your emotional strength, your ability to adapt, they're not static traits, they're muscles. And muscles grow with use, with challenge, with recovery. The Stoics knew this long before modern psychology gave it a name. Epictetus reminded us that we cannot control everything that happens, but we can control how we respond, what we learn, how we adapt, and who we choose to become next. And that brings us to something just as powerful, emotional balance. Because having a growth mindset doesn't mean ignoring your feelings. It means learning to feel deeply without being ruled by those feelings. It's okay to be disappointed, to feel hurt, to feel stuck. But those emotions don't define you. They're visitors, not your identity. Emotional balance is about giving yourself permission to feel without letting those feelings dictate your truth or your future. Think about this. When something goes wrong, do you immediately spiral into blame, shame, or regret? Or can you pause and ask instead, what is this moment here to teach me? What would it look like to grow through this instead of just getting over it? Because the truth is, when you combine a growth mindset with emotional balance, something powerful happens. You stop seeing life as something to survive and start seeing it as something you're shaping. Even your hardest seasons become rich with meaning. You begin to trust that every experience, no matter how uncomfortable, is another layer in the person you're becoming. And over time, this way of seeing the world changes everything. You become less reactive, less afraid of failure, more curious, more resilient, more intentional, you don't just bounce back, you bounce forward. So here's a gentle reminder for you today. You are not meant to be perfect. You are meant to evolve. And every moment, yes, even the hard ones, is an invitation to do just that. Over time, you don't just grow stronger. You grow wiser, more flexible, and more alive. Keep showing up, keep learning. And remember, every setback is just the soil for a future breakthrough. Building an unshakable life. Let's pause for a moment and take a breath, not to rush toward the next idea, but to let everything we've explored so far settle into your heart. Because emotional mastery is not about suppressing your feelings or becoming unshakably stoic in the cold, hardened sense of the word. It's about learning to choose how you respond, even when your emotions feel loud, messy, or overwhelming. It's about noticing the space between what happens and how you act, and choosing again and again to respond with clarity rather than chaos. That's the real strength. It's not found in the absence of anger, fear, or sadness. It's found in the presence of awareness, in that tiny, powerful moment when you pause instead of react, when you take a breath instead of snapping, when you reflect instead of spiraling. And the best part? You don't have to master it all at once. You just need to begin. Every deep breath you take instead of shouting, every journal entry where you unpack your day, every time you catch a negative thought and gently shift it. Those are the building blocks of emotional strength. They're small, quiet, almost invisible from the outside. But inside, they're changing everything. Because this journey we're on, it's not a sprint. It's a lifelong process, a practice, a remembering. And some days you'll forget, you'll react, you'll fall back into old habits. That's okay. Growth isn't about never stumbling. It's about always coming back to center. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. So if you've made it this far, take a moment to celebrate that. You're not just surviving life anymore. You're shaping it with awareness, with intention, with heart. Over time, you don't just become calmer. You become unshakable, grounded in who you are, awake to what matters, and free to live from a place of true inner peace. This is your life, and every conscious step you take toward emotional clarity is a step towards something extraordinary. So take a breath and keep walking, one mindful moment at a time.